Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for being here today. You didn't get a chance to respond to Ms. Plaskett, so I'm going to give you a chance to respond, Secretary Bessent. Where did she go wrong in her statement?
Well, first of all, I would fire the staffer who did that chart because it stopped in February 2025, and prices are down substantially since then. But that's an inconvenient truth. Secondly, the S&P, if the Congresswoman would care to check Bloomberg, the stock market, as judged by the S&P, which is the most widely held index by American 401ks, is up on the year. Up.
It is up month by month. But
No.
Excuse me, ma'am. It's my time.
And we don't interrupt. Excuse me, we don't interrupt is what I was learned. Since January 1st, it is my business for 40 years to know what the stock market does, and it is up on the year. So.
Thank you for that clarification, Secretary. I want to go back and look at a little bit more history, some recent history. When Democrats had the trifecta just a few years ago as part of their Inflation Reduction Act, which actually skyrocketed inflation, they enacted their so-called Corporate Alternative Minimum Tax, or CAMT as it's known, a wildly complex and burdensome 15% minimum tax for job creators across America. This policy was so difficult to implement that even Biden's Treasury Department could not finalize regulations after 2 years of the law being enacted. That's why I was pleased, Secretary, to see that the IRS last week released guidance that provides relief from the CAMT. The guidance provides tax penalty relief for the 2025 year, but perhaps more importantly, the IRS announced that it will not finalize the Biden administration's proposed CAMT regulations in their current form, but will instead issue additional guidance in response to taxpayer comments. I know I personally heard from several constituents concerned about this disastrous minimum tax. Secretary Bessent, could you please elaborate on the recent action that the Treasury Department and the IRS took to provide taxpayer relief from the CAMT and preview any future action the administration might take?
Sir, the KMT is part of an overall simplification for businesses. And we have tried to do that across the board where we've seen it, as several members on the Republican side of the aisle have pointed out. This is a pro-business administration. I would categorize the previous administration as few business people, academics, career politicians.
Secretary, let's go back even further in history. In 1963, President John F. Kennedy faced a critical economic situation due to years of excessively high tax rates, wasteful government spending, and undulating unemployment rates. His proposed solution at the time, what was it? It was lowering taxes, both for individuals and for corporations. And by doing this, and in doing this, this is what he said. He said, quote, "This will restore an idea that has helped make our country great, that a person who devotes his efforts to increasing his income, thereby adding to the nation's income and wealth, should be able to retain a reasonable share of the results." I happen to believe that more hardworking Americans need to retain more and more of what they earn, and the more of that they retain, the better. It brings liberty to their lives. This is the idea precisely that I think President Trump is trying to get to through his Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017, and then once again in the One Big Beautiful Bill. If you want to increase innovation, spur economic growth, and raise overall revenues, you lower taxes for everybody and put more money in the hands of hardworking Americans, small businesses, and farmers. Would you agree with that proposition, Secretary Bessent? And would you say that the One Big Beautiful Bill is perhaps the most pro-growth, pro-worker, pro-business legislation since the TCJA, maybe even more so?
Congressman Moran, what you are alluding to, the President Kennedy said was, and I will tie it back to this horrendous inflation that we saw during the Biden administration. His economic advisor was a Yale professor, James Tobin, and he asked Professor Tobin, what is the governing factor on government spending? It's inflation, isn't it? And I'm afraid that Secretary Yellen, who was a dissertation student of Professor Tobin, did not heed that lesson as we got the great inflation during the past period from this government spending. And look, I think that this is the nature of U.S. enterprise. This is why we have the greatest economy in the world. This is why Europe cannot get out of its own way. China has a command and control economy, that we push for Americans to be able to keep more of their own money, to simplify starting businesses, and that is what we are trying to do. And that's why, as I said, trade, tax, but deregulation is going to be very important here, because what we are finding is that it is very difficult. One of the reasons it's difficult to make or build things in this country is because of regulation. If you try to build a pipeline, you need certainty that for us to be energy dominant, to build an electric grid, if we are going to be the AI superpower that we are on our way to being, it will require a substantial increase in generation capacity. So permitting new electrical generation, but equally as important, permitting the transmission. We need government to be a partner, not an adversary.
I wholeheartedly agree, Secretary Bessent. The more liberty for our businesses and our individuals, our families, and our farmers, the better for our economy. It spurs innovation and economic growth. With that, I yield back. Thank you.